Imagine walking into a cafe on a busy Monday morning, expecting nothing more than a cup of coffee and a little human interaction. But what if that ordinary moment turned into the most expensive mistake of a billionaire CEO's life? Today's story is about a high-powered executive, worth billions, who thought he could belittle anyone who crossed his path until he met the one person he underestimated the most. A black waitress, serving tables with calm professionalism, suddenly became the center of a shocking confrontation that would cost a staggering $3.5 billion deal. Instantly, the tension was electric. The CEO, known for his sharp suits and sharper ego, sneered and called her stupid, convinced that authority and money gave him the upper hand. But what he didn't know was that this seemingly ordinary waitress had an extraordinary secret one that would turn the tables in a way no one could predict, with the power to uncover truths and enforce justice on a national level. She was far more than she appeared. In this story, we'll explore arrogance, instant consequences, and the shocking irony of underestimating the wrong person. The CEO's reputation, fortune, and pride all hung in the balance, and one simple insult set off a chain of events that left everyone stunned. By the end of this tale, you'll see why nobody, no matter how rich or powerful, should ever judge too quickly. The CEO had built his empire on confidence, ambition, and a reputation for making deals that others only dreamed of. He was used to boardrooms, luxury jets, and signing billion-dollar contracts with the flick of a pen. But this cafe encounter was different, completely outside his carefully controlled world. The waitress, on the other hand, moved through her day with quiet precision, her eyes observing everything, her mind calculating far more than any customer could guess. There was a calm authority about her that made even the most confident people pause, though few realized why. Her colleagues at the cafe thought of her as just another hard-working server, polite but private, always keeping her personal life to herself. No one suspected she held one of the most powerful positions in the country, with access to secrets, investigations, and intelligence that could change the outcome of multi-billion-dollar deals. And when the CEO decided to unleash his arrogance, he didn't just insult her, he triggered a chain reaction that no amount of money could fix. Outside, the city moved on, unaware that inside this small cafe, fortunes, careers, and egos were about to collide. Every smirk, every word, and every gesture carried weight far beyond a tip jar. As the tension mounted, one question lingered in the air. Could the CEO survive this encounter without losing everything he thought he controlled? The answer, however, was still unfolding, and it was far more dangerous than anyone imagined. The cafe fell into an uneasy silence as the CEO leaned across the counter, his voice sharp, laced with contempt. "Do you even understand what you're doing?" he demanded, smirking at what he thought was incompetence. Around them, other customers tried to avoid the tension, pretending to scroll on their phones or sip their coffee. But every eye was drawn to the unfolding drama. The waitress, calm and collected, didn't flinch. Her response was measured, almost teasingly polite, but her words carried an authority that belied her uniform. She knew how far she could push, how quickly the situation could escalate, and she had eyes and ears everywhere. She wasn't just serving coffee, she was evaluating, calculating, and silently signaling consequences that the CEO could never anticipate. Meanwhile, inside the CEO's world, his advisors were already feeling the ripple effects. Rumors of a failed $3.5 billion deal had begun circulating, and social media was buzzing, though no one yet knew the full story. Investors started asking questions, and the CEO's carefully constructed image of dominance and control was starting to crack. The other side, her colleagues at the cafe, remained unaware of the magnitude of the confrontation. To them, it was just another tense customer. But behind the counter, the stakes were anything but ordinary. Every gesture, every word, and every glance was loaded with hidden meaning, an invisible chess game with fortunes and reputations on the line. The real question was no longer just who would win the argument, it was whether anyone could predict the fallout from a single insult, and how far the waitress was willing to let justice play out. The tension was far from over, and the next move could change everything. The air in the cafe felt heavier with every passing second. The CEO, growing increasingly impatient, slammed his hand on the counter, sending a cup rattling. "I've spent decades building this empire," he barked, voice rising, "and you think you can talk to me like that?" Every word carried his pride and fury, but it only seemed to sharpen the calm in the waitress's eyes. She didn't flinch, didn't raise her voice. She simply met him with an unshakable gaze that seemed to see straight through the facade of wealth and power. At that moment, the world outside was closing in. Investors were on calls, checking news feeds, and waiting for updates about the $3.5 billion deal. Social media chatter hinted at a brewing scandal, though no one had the full story. Inside, the cafe had grown tense. Other customers whispered, glanced nervously, and instinctively reached for their phones. Sensing that something monumental was unfolding before them, the waitress subtly activated a sequence of hidden communications, almost imperceptible, signaling authorities and colleagues in her world an invisible network, ready to move the moment she gave the word. The CEO, oblivious, kept pressing, each insult each sarcastic comment digging him deeper into a trap he couldn't see. Time seemed to stretch as they faced each other, the gap between arrogance and authority shrinking by the second. Every second counted, every move mattered, and the consequences of a single wrong step were monumental. The tension was unbearable, the stakes higher than ever. In the moment before the collision, the climax was almost here, just as the CEO leaned in, convinced he had cornered her with his wealth and status. The waitress's phone buzzed softly in her apron pocket. She glanced at it, and a shadow of a smile crossed her face, one that the CEO couldn't interpret. The message wasn't just a notification, it was confirmation that a larger plan was already in motion. She wasn't acting alone. Behind her, calm exterior lay a web of connections that reached far beyond the cafe, stretching into the highest levels of national security. Suddenly, her eyes flicked to a security camera near the entrance. Within moments, a discreet alert had been triggered, and agents were mobilizing quietly, ready to intervene if necessary. The CEO, still seething, had no idea that his every word and gesture was being monitored, analyzed, and recorded by people who wielded far more power than he ever imagined. Every insult he hurled now carried consequences he couldn't foresee. Meanwhile, outside the cafe, the $3.5 billion deal was unraveling faster than anyone expected. Investors and board members were on edge, sensing instability. Rumors were beginning to leak, and the CEO's reputation teetered on the edge of disaster. The public was about to witness a downfall, born not of poor strategy, but of arrogance and underestimating the wrong person. The stakes had just escalated beyond money and pride. With hidden forces closing in and secrets ready to surface, the tension in the room became almost unbearable. One wrong move could trigger consequences that would shake the CEO's empire, and no one would see it coming. The cafe door swung open, and in a quiet, commanding wave, 2 agents entered. The CEO froze, finally realizing that the woman he had mocked so casually was no ordinary waitress. The room seemed to close in as the agents approached, their presence calm but unmistakably authoritative. His phone buzzed incessantly, investors, lawyers, and board members demanding answers, and for the first time, the CEO felt the full weight of his arrogance. The waitress stood, calm and unshaken, her voice steady as she addressed him. "It's over, your deal is off, and your behavior has consequences that no amount of money can erase." In that moment, the $3.5 billion deal that had seemed untouchable collapsed instantly. The CEO's empire, built on ego and power, trembled before her quiet but undeniable authority. Cameras and hidden recordings captured everything, ensuring there would be no way to spin the incident in his favor. But just as the CEO began to grasp the severity of his downfall, a final twist hit. One of the agents handed her a small envelope, and inside was a confidential document, a clue that someone else had been manipulating the CEO behind the scenes. Using his arrogance to their advantage, even as justice had been served in the cafe, a shadowy new conflict loomed, hinting at a conspiracy far bigger than anyone had realized. The waitress smiled faintly, knowing this was just the beginning. The CEO had lost the deal, his reputation was shattered, but the game was far from over, and the next move would shock the world. The cafe slowly returned to its normal rhythm, though the air still felt charged with the memory of what had just happened. Customers whispered among themselves, astonished by the sudden downfall of a billionaire CEO who had seemed untouchable just moments before. The waitress returned to her station, her calm demeanor unchanged, but inside, she felt the quiet satisfaction of justice served. The $3.5 billion deal was gone, but more importantly, arrogance had finally met its match. Word of the confrontation spread rapidly, dominating headlines and social media feeds. People around the world debated the CEO's behavior, the consequences of